This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg in South Africa. I'm Sam Marshall. This show is live and broadcast from our studios in Auckland Park. We're also streaming live on YouTube with the entire show available on our YouTube channel. Today we cross live to Durban ahead of the planned march against xenophobia. We talk to an expert on the reasons behind the flare-ups. President Jacob Zuma is back in the National Assembly for the question and answers session. But first, let's get the day's news with Anine Domel.
Good morning, I'm Anine Domel. Let's just have a look at the stories making headlines today. President Jacob Zuma will make a statement in the National Assembly today on the xenophobic violence which has swept across KwaZulu-Natal. Zuma is expected to make the announcement ahead of taking oral questions. He will address MPs at 2 o'clock before he's set to answer outstanding questions from last year's chaotic August 21st sitting. The sitting was suspended after EFF members disrupted his question and answer session. Zuma earlier condemned the attacks in an interview with the SABC, describing them as unacceptable.
We have seen the anger. We accept that people were frustrated. We are calling for calm, that we should solve these problems.
All citizens of KwaZulu-Natal have been invited to join Durban's Peace March today. The march will be hosted after almost a week of clashes between police, locals and foreigners in the CBD and surrounding areas. Thousands are expected to walk to the eThekwini City Hall, where statements will be made against the xenophobic events of the past week. Police have issued a stern warning against anyone planning to disrupt the march. Meanwhile, police are keeping a close watch on areas in Germiston and Johannesburg. About 20 foreigners went to the Primrose police station in Germiston last night seeking shelter. Yesterday, tensions flared in Johannesburg city centre after a taxi driver attacked an Ethiopian man and cars were stoned. The South African Police Service and Metro Police will be monitoring the areas to prevent any violence from taking place. Malawi will repatriate its nationals from South Africa following the upsurge in xenophobic violence. Zimbabwe has also condemned the attacks, blamed on locals who accuse foreigners of taking their jobs. At least 5 foreigners, including a 14-year-old boy, have been killed in attacks in Durban and surrounding townships since last week. And the DA says President Jacob Zuma's responding affidavit has no basis to stop the party's review application from going ahead in connection with the so-called spy tapes. The party approached the High Court in Pretoria in a bid to have the MPA's 2009 decision to drop corruption charges against President Zuma reserved. This on the grounds that the move was politically motivated. The president submitted his responding papers late yesterday. Remember, you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page. Just search for Newsroom. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Sam, over to you.
Thanks, Anine. Now, religious and political leaders will hold a peace march from Curry's Fountain to the Durban City Hall today in a bid to stop attacks against foreign nationals. KwaZulu-Natal government spokesperson Tommy Ngwenya says the march will be a stand against xenophobia and an expression of commitment to end the violence. A march by hundreds of foreigners against xenophobic attacks last week in Durban city centre was cancelled after a crowd of taxi drivers and unemployed youth threatened to attack them. Around 7,000 foreigners have fled from their homes in the townships around Durban since the attacks began 3 weeks ago, and at least 5 people have been killed. SABC reporter Yanda Mshlongo is in the thick of things and joins us from that march. Yanda, good morning and thank you very much for joining us. Just set the scene for us this morning, Yanda. We're expecting, in actual fact, how many people are we expecting to take part in this march? And what will be the overall and the underlining theme of this march?
Well, Sam, we are expecting between 10 and 20,000 people from across the province of KwaZulu-Natal, and not just only here in KZN. We understand that other provinces as well have been invited to come in and join this march, where the people of KwaZulu-Natal are taking a stand against the recent xenophobic attacks. The government, of course, will be leading this march. It has been arranged by our Premier, Senzo Mchunu, as well as working together with the Durban City Mayor, James Nxumalo, and his executives. We also have the religious leaders from the various denominations. I know leading the Roman Catholic Church will be Cardinal Wilfred Napier. We'll also have a very well-known Bishop, Reuben Phillips, who will be amongst the leaders of the religious denominations, also in front, and will be leading this march. Basically, Sam, the people of KwaZulu-Natal are saying enough is enough, and they have to bring an end to this siege that has taken over the province of KwaZulu-Natal. As you know, very unfortunately, yesterday that these attacks have also spread outside of the city. We had reports in Pietermaritzburg. But just very quickly here, Sam, outside, scores of police officers are lining up outside. Apparently they were here since the morning, and we understand also along the route that we'll be following from where we are gathering now, which is at Curry's Fountain. There are police officers, and as you can see behind me, hundreds of marshals are also being prepared. And amongst those marshals are members of the MKAVA. They're also here to assist, and we also understand that there will be police officers that will be in plain clothes that will also be with the marshals, obviously there to pick up if there are any incidents or acts of intimidation amongst the crowd. Sam.
Ayana, we've seen some stern warnings from police saying that violence will not be tolerated. Is there an expectancy of some kind of flare-up along the way? What is the word on the ground? I mean, we know that we are going to have some serious religious and political leaders taking part in that march, but are police preparing for every and any eventuality?
Police said, Sam, that they have deployed all officers available. If you remember that now the numbers of the national deployments that have arrived in our province is now at over 800. And that's aside from the police from the province of KwaZulu-Natal. And here I mentioned all units as well will be here to man this march to ensure that no attacks take place, to ensure that the march runs smoothly without any incident. But Sam, speaking on that point earlier on, I just did a call to the leaders of the various different foreign national groups or their communities. I've spoken to the Ethiopians, the Somalians, the Nigerians, the Congolese and the Senegalese, and their leaders, Sam, have said that they have not yet decided on whether or not they are going to take part in the march, particularly for their countrymen. They have advised them at the moment to stay away because they're saying that they are receiving threats, and they're saying that it is not safe for the foreign nationals to come and join the march. The leaders saying they might come through and attend. They said around 10 o'clock they are meeting as we speak, and around 10 o'clock they will then inform us on whether or not they will partake in the march. One of their concerns, Sam, is that they might be safe on their way to the march because of the marshals, because of the police that are on the ground. However, when they disperse, they fear that there won't be any security for them, and that is when they might be attacked. If you remember, just very quickly, the last march that you were talking about, that is when the attack in actual fact took place, the scuffle, and when that Ethiopian national was hit by a stone in the Durban CBD. That was after they had gathered at the City Hall and as they were dispersing on their way home. So those are the fears that they have raised with us, and at the moment, Sam, we are not sure whether or not they will attend this march.
Ayana, final question very quickly to you. One of the issues is that this march is all about unity and saying no to xenophobia. What will be some of the other interventions that have been discussed at ground level after this march? What are we expecting these political leaders to do? We saw the president come out very strongly against the xenophobic attacks yesterday in an exclusive interview with SABC. He's expected to mention that again in Parliament today for his oral session. But what are the leaders on the ground saying? What are we going to do after this march? What is expected? Ayanda.
Well, expected firstly, Sam, of course, is to keep the police that are on the ground and reinforcements, we understand, are going to stay in the province for some time. That is on the security front, which has also been very instrumental in preventing some of the attacks, also working closely with the intelligence, providing police information, and obviously having able to prevent some of those planned attacks. But on top of that, local councillors have also been called in. There have been several meetings with councillors in affected areas and areas that are not affected, where they suspect that those attacks might spread to those areas. Councillors have been asked to call community meetings to speak to locals. Yesterday, also, Sam, in the afternoon, the government of the KZN also met with local businesses. One will remember that there was a letter that came from local businesses that was sent to the Durban mayor, which said that by the 17th, they wanted all foreign nationals to leave the townships and all their businesses to close. We understood or suspect that that may have been one of the reasons why we saw this violence, because if you look at all of it, most of the attacks have been on the stores and not the residential or the places where the foreign nationals stay. So those are some of the steps, Sam, that are going to be put in place after this march to try and curb this violence.
Yanda, thank you very much for joining us from Curry's Fountain in Durban. It's the starting point for that march. And as you heard in that interview with our SABC reporter, loads of political and religious leaders expected to lead that march. And of course, at the front of that march will be the Premier of KZN, Kunu. Now, after the events of xenophobia in May 2008, where 62 people died and more than 1,000 foreign nationals were turned into refugees, many South Africans thought it was an end to the attacks. However, the ills of xenophobia have come to haunt our country again. Now, today we are joined by Professor Michael Neocosmos from the Rhodes University, who is the director of the Uhuru Institute at Rhodes University. He joins us to give us an in-depth analysis of the current xenophobic attacks in South Africa. Professor, thank you very much for joining us here on Newsroom. What do we understand are the underlying causes of xenophobia in South Africa?
Good morning. I think the issue is actually very, very complex. But fundamentally, I think I would say it is political in nature. Most of the time, people refer to poverty as the reason for xenophobia. But I don't think it's simply poverty. Poverty plays a role, but it's not sufficient. Of course, poverty doesn't explain the target. Poverty explains people's frustrations, right? But it can't explain why people take their frustrations out on people who they deem to be foreigners. Incidentally, you mentioned the events in 2008. I think we should also mention that out of the, 62 people who were killed, 21 were actually South African. So the idea of who is a foreigner is not obvious, because you're not asked for your identity papers before you're attacked. Okay, it is done on the basis of prejudices. So the question then is, what gives rise to these prejudices? What gives rise to people's notion that they can solve all their problems by getting rid of foreigners? And I think there are two levels of explanation here. The one which is a broad national one, and the second one which is a more local one, a more precise one, as in this particular case, KwaZulu-Natal. I don't know. If we start first with the broad national one, it has been the case since 1994, at least, that foreigners have been, or people who are perceived to be foreigners, have been said to be associated with all sorts of ills, including murder, including violence, including illegality, including at one time the bringing in of HIV/AIDS. And these associations between the foreign, usually African, but not exclusively, and these various ills have been made by a number of politicians from all political parties and a number of very, very influential people. Most notoriously, of course, our First Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who at the time said that, in fact, foreigners were a threat to the RDP. But it didn't just come from one quarter. It was across political parties by all sorts of politicians.
Professor, let me get into this conversation, because if we are saying that there are two bases for some of the xenophobia attacks, if we apportion blame to some of the leadership, we have seen the leadership come out very strongly over the last couple of days. We've heard the president more than once, even in an interview yesterday, condemning the attacks. We've heard other leaders within KZN, outside KZN, across different spheres condemning the attacks, and yet it's not stopping.
Yes, see, the problem is much deeper than simply a condemnation, because you're actually condemning specifics. The difficulty is that over time, foreigners have been constructed as a problem. And it's easy to solve what we think are our problems by directing them towards them. So there's a much more broader view of the fact that in fact, foreigners come here to take. They don't come here to provide or to give. No one, you rarely hear people in power saying that foreigners come here to provide jobs. They come here to provide know-how and so on and so on. Usually the statements are, no, they're coming here to take from us, to take from our health system, to take from our democracy, and so on and so forth. So the general discourse, if you like.
Professor, we've got to wrap up this conversation very, very quickly. But I want,
unfortunately,
yeah, I want you.
The difficulty is we can't talk about this seriously in a few sound bites.
No, you can't.
That's
but
the difficulty.
In 20 seconds, very quickly, I just want you to explain mob mentality, because we have seen this spread from township to township, and the question begs that we've heard the words criminality too. So, how much of this is South Africans who think they've got a genuine concern, and people that are using this current xenophobia issue to commit acts of crime? Very quickly.
Well, you see, I think what's happening in KwaZulu-Natal fundamentally is, what the impression one gets is that there's some power brokers at local level, or some people who have got businesses who see foreigners as providing competition, and therefore want to undermine that competition in one way or another. The difficulty also in KZN has been, who is a foreigner? It's not at all clear that foreigners are simply not South Africans. You see, I mean, even people from the Eastern Cape are sometimes called foreigners in KwaZulu-Natal. And if we're not careful, soon Indians are going to be called foreigners in KwaZulu-Natal. Do you understand what I'm getting at?
Yes, Professor, we've got to leave it there.
There's an ethnic dimension to this, which people can easily take hold of and use to what they think is to solve their problems. And in fact, it's no solution at all.
For sure. Professor, thank you very much for joining us from Rhodes University. He's the director of Uhuru Institute at Rhodes University, talking to us about some of the underlying causes for the xenophobic attacks. Now, last month, students at the University of Cape Town took a stand against the removal of Cecil John Rhodes' statue, causing an uprising across the country for many other statues that resembled colonialism to also be taken down. There was an outcry on social media from all walks of life expressing their views and choosing a side to support, but one student took a different approach and instead wrote letters to races of South Africa. Joining us now from our Cape Town studio is Busi Njakuyako, and she joins us from our Cape Town studio. Busi, I hope I didn't butcher your name too much, your surname. But let's start off this conversation by why the different approach? When the majority were in chorus about one thing, you chose to have a completely different view on the subject.
Hi, Sam. My surname is Mchiako, but I'm used to people getting it wrong all the time.
I got it wrong too.
But it's absolutely fine. No, I didn't think that I took a different approach, well, I didn't see it as it being a different approach. I just thought that I took an approach that had to be taken, the right approach. I mean, you can't tell a story by telling it from one side or another, because it's not complete. you can't address a group of people and not address the rest, because what you get then is a division. And so you need to first establish that, okay, you may see yourselves as being on two different sides. These are your issues, and then these are your issues. And now, get over your issues, come together. We have issues that face both sides, both groups. And so I think that was necessary to first establish, because, I mean, I know people complain about why are you separating, why is there division, but initially you have to establish the fact that people do see themselves as being divided. You have to establish the fact that, okay, there's division, but now we need to be able to find that unity throughout the division.
In an age of social media where most people find their rhythm or what they want to say in 140 characters, you chose to put down online letters. Why the online letters? Why not just snippets?
Because this initially wasn't supposed to be like, like letters in an official sense. It was basically a status that I wrote on Facebook, but it was part 2 of a status. Part 1 has also now been shared, but so this was, the part 1 was basically establishing the fact that despite our past, we actually need to be able to move forward. And then going into it deeper was part 2, and that's when the division came about. And then I was like, okay, dear white people, so and so and so. Dear black people, so and so and so. And then, dear government, because we have elected you and you're supposed to serve us. You're not supposed to be working against us. And so that's where that came about. And so people took it as like 3 different letters or whatever, but it was just one status. And so, yeah, I think the approach that I took was the fact that I had a lot to say. And the fact that I did say some of those things on Twitter and then immediately they were received very badly, and then I had to post the entire thing and say, context is very important.
Let's talk about...
And so you can't just say things like that.
But see, let's talk about context very quickly, because you do talk in your letters about white privilege and a sense of black entitlement. Talk to me more about that, because when we started this conversation, we talked about that people are different and they come from different spheres of life with different influences that maybe define how they think. Talk to me about why that was so important to highlight.
Because usually, I think one of the biggest problems we do have in this country is the lack of empathy. People can understand their own problems and they can relate to people who have similar problems, but they can't look beyond their own spectrum, and they can't go to the other side and say, okay, this person might be facing these types of problems and this is why. And so I think that you need to be able to establish what type of problems people have. I mean, we are all South African, but 1994 did not change a lot of things. Okay, the rules were changed, the regulations were changed, but society did not necessarily change. And because of that, there's still great division. And just kind of covering all of that by saying we're a rainbow nation is not actually productive for our country, because we hide behind this fallacy of the fact that we're all a rainbow nation, but there are so many underlying issues in communities, in white communities, in their own circles. They speak a certain way, and there's great distrust. In black communities, they speak a certain way. And because of that, because these issues aren't being voiced, people don't understand that they have white privilege. Black people don't understand that they have a sense of entitlement. They think, okay, because of apartheid, I now deserve this and this and that. White people are like, no, well, I wasn't born during apartheid, or I wasn't alive then, I wasn't the government, I didn't do anything wrong. Why should I feel guilty for what I have? And it's not about guilt. No one wants anyone to feel guilty. We need people to understand that in 1994, there wasn't a reset button. There wasn't an equal leveling to a sense. Everyone started off at different places, and you need to understand that, okay, I started off here and here because of the past injustices. I started off here because of what my family was able to get, despite everything.
Yep.
So I think that needed to be established, the white privilege and the black disadvantage, and then the black sense of entitlement and the white sense of we don't want to be guilty, we need to just move on, and you can't move on until you talk about it.
But see, we're going to leave it on that very powerful note, and I think many people in different sectors of our society will agree with you that we can't move on until we sit down and talk about it. Busi Mjiyako, who wrote one letter separated in three parts to, as you put it, the white part of South Africa, the black part of South Africa, and to government as well. Now, let's take a look at your tweets. Please remember to send us your views on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. This is the tweet pick of the day, and it says from Cyril _construction, it says #xenophobia. Sometimes South Africa needs to protect its own country, and that comes from Cyril Construction. There's another one that says 400,000 South Africans in Perth, Australia. Imagine if xenophobia can start there. How will we feel? And that's #no to xenophobia. That comes from just MPM. From Setu, it says the march happening in Durban, all the condemnation that has happened in mainstream and social media show that SANS are all not xenophobic. And of course, he's reacting to the march that's set to take place in Durban today. Zanella Mia says these attacks aren't only occurring in Durban, situation in Johannesburg is just as rife. Why isn't there a march in Gauteng? Let's take a look at another one. This comes from Mlakash, who says those of you who were passionately condemning xenophobic attacks online, are you going to the peace march in Durban? And maybe a bit of a call to action there from Lakash, saying that maybe it's just not good enough to tweet. Maybe you should, in actual fact, be out and about and being quite vocal about your condemnation. Now, today's picture of the day comes from Aldrin St. Pierre with the caption, attacks in CBD. This guy has a brick thrown at him at #SABC News. Aldrin St. Pierre, one of our guys on the ground, one of the SABC reporters, and what a telling picture of some of the things that's been happening in KZN over the past couple of days. That's our viewer pick of the day. Now let's take a look at the front pages from around the globe. In Israel, the Jerusalem Post reports Israel reserves the right to defend itself against a nuclear Iran. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Wednesday night as he compared its regime with that of the Nazis in his address at the annual State Holocaust commemoration at Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. Moving to the USA, the Washington Post leads with the former New England Patriots player Aaron Hernandez, who was found guilty of first-degree murder by a Massachusetts jury on Wednesday. Hernandez was convicted in the 2013 murder of one-time friend Odin Lloyd. And in Europe, a veteran Labour politician is to escape charges for the second time over alleged child sex crimes in a decision that will prompt anger at prosecutors and claims of an establishment cover-up. Okay, we take an ad break on Newsroom. You don't go anywhere.
Ja, de paar bezig. Kom.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Let's just have a look at the stories making headlines today. President Jacob Zuma will make a statement in the National Assembly today on the xenophobic violence which has swept across KwaZulu-Natal. Zuma is expected to make the announcement ahead of taking oral questions. He will address MPs at 2 o'clock before he's set to answer outstanding questions from last year's chaotic August 21st sitting. Zuma earlier condemned the attacks in an interview with the SABC, describing them as unacceptable. All citizens of KwaZulu-Natal have been invited to join Durban's Peace March today. The march will be hosted after almost a week of clashes between police, locals and foreigners in the CBD and surrounding areas. Thousands are expected to walk to the eThekwini City Hall, where statements will be made against xenophobic events of the past week. Police have issued a stern warning against anyone planning to disrupt the march. Meanwhile, police are keeping a close watch on areas in Germiston and Johannesburg. About 20 foreigners went to Primrose Police Station in Germiston last night seeking shelter. Yesterday, tensions flared in Johannesburg city centre after a taxi driver attacked an Ethiopian man and cars were stoned. Remember, you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page. Just search for Newsroom. You can also follow us and send your views to @SABC Newsroom. Sam, back to you.
Thanks, Anine. Now, President Jacob Zuma will be back in Parliament today to answer questions from opposition parties. The last time President Zuma appeared in the National Assembly was on the 11th of March, and the 16th of April was provided as an additional day after the President appeared in the National Assembly to answer oral questions on August 21st last year when it was disrupted. He was disrupted by EFF MPs who chanted "pay back the money" regarding the security upgrades at Nkandla. President Jacob Zuma is also expected to make a statement in the National Assembly on the xenophobic violence which has swept across KZN. For the latest, we are joined from Parliament by SABC presidential correspondent Mzondile Mbeche. Mr. Mbeche, good morning. Thank you for joining us here in Newsroom. Before we talk about this very lively debate that is expected between the President and those asking questions, yesterday we saw a very strong interview that you conducted with the President where he came out very strongly against the xenophobic attacks. How much of that will be carried forward in that speech ahead of the answers and questions session?
Thank you very much. As you've indicated, this is going to be a very important day in the history of South Africa. Yes, we started yesterday when the President condemned these ongoing attacks. They paint a very, very bad picture for us as a country. And today is the day when the President is expected to conclude the business of the 21st of August. But before that happens, to show the importance of these statements regarding the attacks on foreign nationals. So there would be a moment where President will lead by delivering a statement, basically condemning this and giving clarity to South Africans to say the issues that affect people of this country are being dealt with, and whilst those issues are being dealt with, South Africans must also accept that we have to live with foreigners because they are our brothers, they are our sisters. What divides us needs to be addressed. So the President will lead the charge in Parliament today. And then, of course, after that, the opposition parties that are represented here will also get an opportunity to react and also make their own statements. And then that will afford Parliament the opportunity to formally condemn these acts that are happening in our country.
Zondile, are we expecting any pronouncements on actions going further, or will it just be a statement from the President condemning the attacks? Are we expecting at some level for the President to maybe talk about some of the implementations that will be put forward, especially in areas like KZN? We've now heard it spread to other parts of South Africa. Are we going to see anything other than talk?
You would know that the President has already dispatched 3 ministers who are already there. They are on the ground. They are looking at the situation. They are providing whatever is necessary for the foreigners. They are giving direction on whatever issues need to be done. What we are expecting from the President today, and as he has done, I think in the past few days, you've been reporting in the show that not only was that interview we did with him yesterday, but on the commemoration of Chris Hani, he also went to lengths describing this situation relating to this. So after the President had spoken, so as I had said, the opposition parties will have also the opportunity to speak. And then that will afford now Parliament to be able to make a declaration. As you know, Parliament is the representative of the people of South Africa. So you are likely to hear one voice from this House, despite its differences politically, but you are likely to hear one voice, people condemning this, saying this should not happen. And the President has actually hinted that maybe some of the things that need to be done to make sure that these things don't happen, the country may have to relook at the immigration policies. Once that is done, we expect the President perhaps to touch on those issues, to say we, as the country, we can't afford to be seen to be chasing people out of the country. But what we need to do is to come up with better policies that will make it possible for all of us to coexist, and that may include a relook at the immigration policy that we currently have.
Zondile, let's also touch on very quickly on the fact that this is still part of the ongoing question and answers session that started in August 21 last year when it was disrupted by the EFF. Then, what are we expecting some of the other points to be in that Q&A session with the President?
Yes, that's actually the sitting today is relating specifically to that. I think they would just take the opportunity at the beginning by making the statements, because the business of the House today is to conclude what was started on August 21 last year. You remember, as you've indicated, the disruptions made it impossible for the President to conclude all the questions. So you had about 3 outstanding questions that the President still needed to answer to. Those questions relate basically to the issue of recognition of the Khoisan leadership. That question which will be posed by the ANC, and then we expect also the questions from the IFP which will relate to the issue of the pardons, special pardons, the dispensation, because this issue has been going on, and you know the IFP has been complaining, saying some of its people are still in jail, and they believe those people are in jail for political reasons. So the President will be able to clarify on those issues. And the other issue which will be very important is the US-Africa relations. There's a question to that effect. But coming closer to home, you know, there's an issue of AGOA, the Africa Growth Opportunities Act, that needs to be concluded this year. The President went along with other African leaders to Washington last year. It was one of the first summits between the continent and the US. One of the issues really that came up there was the issue of AGOA that I've just touched upon. So we know that there's still a few issues that needs to be ironed out to make sure that once it's renewed, South Africa is included. And it basically says, so our products will also get some preferential treatment and in the United States. And the presidents actually did yesterday or the day before did inform us to say to try and resolve this issue. Our deputy president spoke to U.S. Vice President relating to this issue. So we expect a bit more clarity when perhaps follow-up questions come from the members of parliament to say where that process is, because it's very important that it's concluded, and South Africa is part of that process.
Zondile, very quickly, 15 seconds. The issue of Nkandla, is that going to come up again? And then also, are we expecting questions related to statues? Very quickly.
As I've said to you, the questions that we expect to be posed to the President are those 3 questions. But, the catch would be on the follow-up. You wouldn't know how opposition parties will phrase their follow-up questions. You probably would have some people trying to sneak what they feel is the strong issue. I won't be totally surprised if somehow they sneak in the issue of Nkandla and, of course, the issue of State 2. But as I've said, these are the 3 main issues that the President will be required to answer today.
So thank you very much for the update. That, of course, is our SABC presidential correspondent, Zondile Mbeche, talking to us about the Q&A that's expected in Parliament. It's going to start at roughly 2 p.m. this afternoon. President Jacob Zuma has called for an end to xenophobic attacks. He spoke exclusively to SABC News, and this is how that conversation went.
What is happening in our country is not acceptable. We condemn this, that people are attacked and killed. We cannot accept that when there are challenges, we then use violence, particularly to our brothers and sisters from the continent. We have said before that when we were in trouble, they helped us to fight our own liberation. They did not chase us away. And therefore, it is important for us to bear that in mind. However, we understand the frustration by the people, given what has happened. Also given that there are people who are living in the country illegally, but also that in terms of the small businesses, certain developments have taken place where the people coming from outside seem to have taken control of the small businesses. These are issues, in my view, that need to be discussed among ourselves, find a solution. A few days ago, I made a statement to this effect, that we are aware of the frustrations that the people in South Africa have been voicing. Perhaps as government, we have not been very quick in addressing these issues. I have tasked 3 ministers to address the current issue, but also to go beyond, that we as government have to discuss how do we create a kind of relationship between ourselves and our sisters and brothers who come to South Africa, because we need to have a regulated way that will avoid friction, that will avoid that people should find themselves having to take their frustrations into their hands and therefore take it out to people who are here from outside of the country. It is clear that there is not necessarily a xenophobia, because I've been saying we have stayed with people from outside for many years. We have never had a problem. There must be specific things socially that have developed that led to this, and this is what we need to focus on and deal with the situation so that there will be harmonious staying beyond this. But I would like to convey my condolences as well to the victims and to those who have lost their loved ones. I think this now must stop, because we cannot continue killing one another. As Africans, as people who are belonging to the same continent, we need to find a way. And the government is working hard to find a way where there will be coexistence properly without depriving people of certain opportunities. These matters must be discussed properly. We have seen the anger. We accept that people were frustrated. We are calling for calm, that we should solve these problems as a government, all of us, together with our brothers and sisters.
Let's take a look at your tweets. Please remember to send us your views on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. And today's tweet comes from Inbal. It says, Kevin J. Rodriguez, who says, at SABC Newsroom, we want more from Busi. Busi shows us a way forward. And that, of course, is in response to hashtag Busi is the best, to a student who wrote letters to different sectors of society in South Africa. This comes from Fox Freeman, who says, at SABC Newsroom, I'm from Zambia watching news in South Africa. People are heartless. They're killing our brothers and our sisters. Hashtag stop xenophobia. Let's look at some more. It's from General Silipe, who says, at SABC Newsroom, the ANC General Secretary has spoken this. People must be screened before they go to the community. And that, of course, in relation to an interview by Gwede Mantashe, comes from Let the Truth Be Told. South Africans are heartless. Everyone is a foreigner somewhere. And that's at SABC Newsroom. Stop xenophobia. That's from Fox Freeman. Now, today's tweet of the day comes from Inbal, who says, memory is what shapes us. Memory is what teaches us. And that is, of course, the 70th commemoration of the Holocaust at hashtag Holocaust, hashtag Memorial Day, never again. Now let's take a look at what is happening on our Newsroom Facebook page. Today, President Jacob Zuma will make a statement in the National Assembly today, this afternoon, on the xenophobic violence which has swept across KZN. Then a group of lawmakers yesterday delivered a petition to the South African Embassy in Harare, Zimbabwe, asking for action to be taken against the wave of recent xenophobic attacks. And also we'll see that MTN contract users will have to dig deeper into their pockets as the mobile giants joins Vodacom and Cell C in hiking contract and data prices. You can find all of these stories and more on our Newsroom Facebook page, or visit our SABC website at www.sabc.co.za/news. Okay, now to commemorate the 70th liberation of the Holocaust, the March of the Living is currently taking place in Poland. It's an annual educational program where students from around the world join in to study the history of the Holocaust. The first march was held in 1988, and since then, over 200,000 participants from 35 countries have walked down the same path leading from Auschwitz to Birkenau. That's where we leave Newsroom for now. We're on an ad break. Please do join us after.
In Africa, mobile devices are tools to make payments, browse the internet, and keep governments in check with social media forums.
It's given an average African too much power in their hands.
And tech creativity is solving some of the continent's problems.
Everything is internet driven.
And on Network, we tell you how Africans are using technology and social media in their everyday lives.
Join Siphumelele Zondi on Network every Sunday at 19:30 CAT.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom. Thank you for choosing to stay with us. Now, Twitter, Facebook and Google are all huge tech players that continue to shape the operations in emerging markets. Another of these players is the world's second largest music streaming service called Deezer. Before launching in America, Deezer launched in South Africa in October last year and now has some 250,000 registered users. Now, to give us a bit of insight into what evolving digital infrastructure's growth potential is in emerging markets like Africa, Asia and the Middle East, we are joined from our Cape Town studios by Head of Emerging Markets at Deezer, Mathieu Molinero. Mathieu, thank you very much for joining us. Let's get into it. Let's look at this emerging markets. What would you say are the top three markets and why?
In terms of potential, I mean, in my region, I mean, covering Europe, Middle East, and Africa, I would say that you definitely have Turkey, and then South Africa is definitely one of the most important countries.
Why do you think Deezer has had the kind of success it's had in South Africa, and why are the emerging markets responding to it? Because actually, music streaming is a very convenient way of listening to music. It really corresponds to the new way of consumptions, because you have access to all the music you want. I mean, Deezer's catalog has around 35 million tracks. You can listen to all these tracks at any time, on any device, anytime, anywhere, when you're on the beach, even when you don't have any internet connections, because you can have also the offline mode, which is kind of a downloading feature for a very affordable price. So that's a very good alternative to piracy, much more convenient and much cheaper than legal downloading platforms, for example. So once people actually start to discover the product and the service, they realize that it's not worth wasting your time and spending hours on bad quality music on piracy and go to platforms like Deezer. And this is what actually we're pushing our free version a lot in emerging markets, meaning that people can actually listen to all the music they want totally on the web. They have access to smart radios on the mobile apps. They just have to bear advertising, but apart from that, they can listen to any kind of music for free. And if they want to have extra features like the offline mode I was talking about earlier on, they have to pay a little bit less than 60 rands a month. You're talking about innovation in the music space, and I'm glad that you touched on piracy, and you're talking about quality. How much work do we still need to do to educate the market to say, yes, you can get it for free, download it illegally, but you're impacting on quality and you're, at the end of the day, hurting a business that has huge potentials to employ people?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's true that there's still a lot of education to be done here in South Africa, and then piracy is still important and has an impact on the music market. The last figures show actually that the music industry in South Africa is losing 10% per year during the last 5 years. So this is why definitely we have to find alternatives to the old systems of the physical sales of legal platforms that are still very expensive. I mean, in order to have just a few tracks. For the price of just a few tracks on legal downloaded platforms, you have access to 35 million tracks on Deezer. So yeah, I think it just means that it doesn't mean that people are not ready to pay for music anymore. People just need a new way of consumption, and the music industry and everybody has to follow and try to develop the best product as possible in order to meet the needs of the new consumers.
And I think maybe that's where there's an opportunity, meeting the need of the new consumers. Well, you're in emerging markets. What are consumers saying to you? Because we are seeing the success of other tech companies and we're getting a glimpse of what the future is going to look like. But I can only imagine as we develop more, the needs change. How do we make sure that we stay abreast of the needs of consumers? And how do we make sure that we're engaging them at the right time and make sure that whatever is coming into the market makes life easier, like applications like Deezer?
For us at Deezer, the most important part actually to satisfy each country, because each country is very specific. I think that would be a very wrong approach to approach every country is exactly the same way with one product that would fit for all the countries. And we put a lot of emphasis on local content. And every time we open a country, and especially an emerging country where local music is very important, we want to hire local editors that really know the local music scene, that has all the networks with the local indie labels and work very closely with the majors in order to be able to have the largest catalog as possible in local music. So we have Tekla in Cape Town in South Africa, who's working with all these labels. So this is really one of our main focus. And then we also need to have a very easy to use service where it's very obvious for the music fan, as soon as they go on board, as soon as they download the app or go to our website, that they can immediately very tailor-made, have a tailor-made profile where they choose directly what kind of music, what kind of artists they like. Are they more into gospel? Are they more into Afrikaans music? Are they more into South African hip-hop or more international, more mainstream kind of artists? And the objective is to have a very personalized
service
feed and profile on Deezer.
We're going to leave it there, but thank you very much for talking to us. Head of Emerging Markets at Deezer, Matthew Molinero, talking to us about music streaming. And you know what our world is eventually going to look like. That is Newsroom. We broadcast live from our studios here in Auckland Park in Johannesburg every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. We also stream live on YouTube at that time, with the show available on demand on your YouTube channel. We love to interact with you and enjoy your contributions and the opinions. This is SABC Newsroom. You've been watching Newsroom. We love it.